dies.
Hello and welcome to the unofficial Maritime Wrestling Podcast interview series. I am Corey Vautour along with Jason and Mark the Mark. How you doing, fellas?
Great. Yourself?
Doing good. Today we have a very special guest, and I'm going to let him introduce himself.
How's it going, guys? Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this interview. My name is Dave Arthur. I'm the grandson of Al Zinck, who was the promoter and part owner of International Wrestling, the other promotion that ran in the Maritimes that often gets overlooked, misremembered, and unfortunately it's starting to be forgotten. But they ran between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick from the 70s, and they also came back for one season in 1984, and Al was partnered with Rudy and Bobby Kay of the Cormier family. And he also briefly promoted for WCW in the early 90s.
Excellent. So what are some of your earliest memories of your grandfather?
Some of my earliest memories, he was always around in my childhood. He was a big part of my life then. And ever since I've had memories, pro wrestling has always been a part of that. I've always had a big love for pro wrestling and was always interested in it from an early age. And he loved that. And then, of course, as I got older, he started telling me about what he did. And he had this room in his house just dedicated to this memorabilia and had all these old photos and stuff like that. And yeah, he would be at family events, and he would take me downstairs while all the rest of the family would be upstairs, and we just go over like old wrestling stuff. He'd show me all these cool photos and tell me all these cool stories. So yeah, those are some of my earliest memories. Just yeah, I've always had a love for wrestling.
Cool. How old were you when you started to realize what he meant to the professional wrestling world?
For as long as I can remember, he always as soon as he saw that I had an interest in it, he would always let me know what he did and the role that he played. And to be honest, I was ignorant to Atlanta Grand Prix for the longest time, just because I thought he was the only show in town for the longest time. When people started talking about Atlanta Grand Prix, I'd think they would be getting confused with international wrestling. But anyways, yeah, and just sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
Yeah, that's okay. What kind of man was your grandfather outside of the wrestling?
Outside of wrestling, he took himself pretty seriously, probably sometimes a little too seriously. But he always used to it depends on who you ask, but he always used to like to talk about the business and always had time for people to reminisce about pro wrestling and talk about the old days. And just anybody that I've crossed paths with that interacted with him, it was always a positive interaction about wrestling. And he always had time for that. And yeah, I always used to love to talk about the wrestling business.
Cool. Did he ever share stories with you on how he got involved in pro wrestling?
Yeah, so, he grew up a scrappy street kid in the Halifax area. I've read articles before that he was from Lunenburg or from Liverpool. That's inaccurate. He was billed from there when he was wrestling professionally. He was billed from Liverpool, but he wasn't from there. I think he had relatives in that area, but he wasn't from Liverpool or Lunenburg. But yeah, he was just always getting into fights as a young kid. Him and Billy Taylor, who ended up being one of the head referees for international wrestling, they grew up really good friends. And they used to just take on everybody under come one, come all mentality. and they would just fight everybody in the neighborhood. And eventually he got into amateur wrestling and boxing down at the local YMCAs.
Oh, yeah.
So
cool.
It was through there. His father somehow knew Len Hughes. And I'm not sure what the friendship or relationship was there, but his father knew Len Hughes somehow. And eventually, Len Hughes saw some potential in my grandfather, Billy Taylor, and some of the other guys that my grandfather was working out with at the time. So he eventually took Al and Billy Taylor under his wing. They trained him, and eventually they started working the undercards of Len Hughes' shows.
Oh
And
yeah,
he
cool.
was always a show opener. He was never like a top guy or a main event guy, and he had no problem with that either. So they would often open the shows, and he was usually he didn't really run the roads either. He was more so a local guy. Like he wrestled a lot in Halifax, and he wrestled in some of the more rural areas.
Cool. And do you know how the partnership between your grandfather and Rudy K first became?
Yeah, well, Rudy and Al, they wrestled on Len Hughes shows together. They never wrestled each other. Al
Okay.
was a bit smaller than Rudy was. But yeah, they used to wrestle on the undercards, and I think they were somewhat friends from that.
Okay.
And Al, he wrestled professionally. I think he started in the 50s, and I don't want to say retired, but he stopped wrestling professionally around 1965, I think is when his last matches were. So after that, he was a plumber by trade.
Oh, cool.
So he went to school for that and a couple other things. So he eventually started plumbing full time after he had gotten out of wrestling professionally. And I think, and don't quote me on this, I think Rudy might have had a trade as well. I'm not too sure what that is. But apparently they had ran into each other on like a plumbing job that Al was on. And Rudy was, wrestling was pretty dry there in between those years. There wasn't a whole lot going on because I think Len Hughes has packed it in at that point. So Rudy had asked Al if he had any interest in starting things up around here because Rudy was working over in the Carolinas, the Mid Atlantics. Like that's where he spent a lot of his time before picking things up back here. So yeah, Al was interested. Rudy told Al that he thought he might have been good at the promoting aspect of it. So yeah, shortly after they ran into each other, they got things together and they started international wrestling under Eastern Sports Association in 1969.
So, one question about your grandfather. How did he balance the business side of things, like promoting, booking TV deals, while also working so closely with the talent?
He was pretty good at keeping those things separate. Like, to be honest, he wasn't really close with a lot of the talent. He really kept, the promoting side of thing and, interacting with the boys, so to speak. He kept those things separate. There were guys that he was close with, like a couple of them, but he wasn't too involved with the boys. And I mean, some of the boys, and it wasn't more so the local guys; it was the guys that were from away. Some of them didn't really think too highly of him, so he was good at keeping his distance in that sense.
Okay. Did your grandfather ever talk to you about what it was like running a wrestling promotion in the Maritimes back in the 70s?
Yeah, I mean, it was huge back then. There was him and there was Atlanta Grand Prix, and yeah, it was. And I mean, no offense to Atlanta Grand Prix, and I'm not trying to shit on them or anything, but they were kind of seen as second tier back in the 70s. I tell people the easiest way to kind of simplify pro wrestling history in the Maritimes was international wrestling had the 70s, and Atlanta Grand Prix had the 80s. And that's largely because there was no international wrestling to compete
Yep.
with back then. But yeah, no, it was a big deal back then. They were looked at as like top tier, and then they eventually earned their NWA affiliation. Unfortunately, it wasn't until things started to fall apart that they had got their NWA affiliation. But yeah, and I mean, a lot of that was Rudy's doing. Rudy was the guy with all the connections, and he was essentially just the face of everything. He was the guy that dealt with the media and he booked the TV and he dealt with a lot of like the TV contracts and stuff like that. So yeah, that was his side of things.
Interesting. I'm going to name off a few wrestlers' names. If you have a story about them, let us know. The first name on this list is one that we've personally talked about in private. Freddie Sweetan. I know you've listened to the No Class Bobby Bass interview. There are some rumors about him. I know you have a story about Freddie Sweetan. So, what can you tell us about old Freddie Sweetan?
Yeah, I mean, everybody liked Freddie Sweetan. You never hear a bad thing about Freddie Sweetan. He was a guy that seemed to get along with pretty much everybody, but he was also tough as nails. And I mean, you could tell just by looking at him, the gigged up forehead. I mean, and just he looked like a guy you wouldn't want to tangle with. And it's funny, a story that I have. Back after the shows in Halifax, the guys used to go to a hotel bar that they would drink at to kind of unwind after the shows. And it was a friend of my dad's family's. I don't know if it was my dad's friend or like one of his brothers, but anyway, they were at the bar that night where all the wrestlers were there. And they, had some liquid courage and had a couple of drinks, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that wrestling shit's fake, right?" So they decided to approach the table, and I don't know if they called out Freddie specifically or if he was just the one that stood up. But anyways, they decided they were going to go over and see how real this wrestling stuff was. So Freddie was the one who took them up on the offer, and he ended up throwing that guy. It wasn't through a window, but it was through like a glass wall. You know what I mean? If you see in like some restaurants, like they have like glass walls there.
Yeah.
Like the
Anyways, that
partition
guy
there?
ended up going through this glass wall and went to my dad's house the next day and saying, "Oh yeah, that wrestling shit's real." So, he had regretted his decision. But anyways, yeah, no, that's my funny story about Freddie. And just he was gone far too soon.
Yeah. What do you think? Like, it's rumor and innuendo that they found him with a bullet in his head. Like, it was never proven. What are your thoughts on how he passed on?
It really depends on who you listen to, really. I mean, I know there was a few guys. I mean, you had interviewed Bobby, and he had mentioned. Did he say he dropped him off, or did he say he actually like hung? Because it was Freddie's birthday the night that he passed away. So it was at a show in New Brunswick.
It was at the York Arena in Fredericton.
Right. Yeah.
And he did remember the gentleman, but a Japanese wrestler, which I believe the only Japanese wrestler was the Great Kuma.
At that, I think there was two Japanese wrestlers, but at that time it would have been Great Kuma, I do believe.
So they dropped him off, and they had shown the Great Kuma the Exorcist and scared the pants out of him. And basically he wanted them to stay with him at his cabin for the party and all that, and the next day they found him dead.
Gotcha. And I heard the bullet in the head story. I also heard that it could have been like a barbecue fire. Apparently Freddie liked to smoke his cigars. Mm-hmm. And being his birthday night, apparently, having a couple celebratory cigars wouldn't have been out of the question. So, it really all depends on what you read, because you read a little bit of everything about his death. It's just shrouded in kind of mystery and controversy. Yeah,
it's one of those guys that, it's unfortunate there's one clip of him online.
That's exactly it. And you hear about the matches that he had, especially with International. I mean, he was a big deal down here. He did some things in the Mid-Atlantics as well. But it's unfortunate that a lot of the local guys like Freddie never got the billing that they deserved down there. But yeah, he was on the top of the card down here and like really big into like taped fist matches.
Yep, chain matches.
Chain matches. I mean, like I said, the gigged up forehead. You can tell that, that those were typically the matches he was involved in. But and there was one story that I read online at the forum. I forget who he was wrestling in the taped fist match, but it just for how real that it seemed. Apparently it was quite the match.
Yeah, wrestling is not like it used to be back then, I remember
it was seen as real and it was seen as legit back then.
Yeah, I was born too late. I'll just say that.
I think we all were.
Yeah. The next names would be the Cormier brothers. This is the Beast, Leo Burke, Bobby, and Rudy K. What can you talk to us about them?
So the closest that he was with out of the brothers would have been the Beast. With Rudy, it was more so a professional relationship. They were friends starting off, of course. But the relationship, I mean, my grandfather wasn't the easiest guy to work with. The relationship it soured with Rudy. With Leo, I mean, Rudy was Leo's brother. So I don't think he chose to deal. I keep going back and forth between Al and my grandfather, but he chose to deal with Rudy over Al for the most part. I mean, I don't think there was like any real beef between Leo and Al, but it was a professional relationship. But him and the Beast, they kept in contact over the years. And I mean, in 2006, Al, I mean, that everything was under the bridge at that point, and that they had a reunion in New Brunswick, and Al had went down for that, and it was, I guess, a big celebration from everything they did throughout the wrestling business. But anyways, and Bobby, he was it was a professional relationship again with Bobby. But yeah, out of the Cormier brothers, Beast was the one that he was like had a friendship with.
Okay.
And kept in contact with over the years.
Cool.
The next name on the list is someone that you told me had a case for being Al's top star at one point, and that's J.J. Dillon.
Yes. Yeah, they have an interesting relationship. But yeah, I mean, JJ, he was brought in by Johnny Weaver. I think Rudy got a lot of the guys from the Mid Atlantics. Like that was, I think, his big connection. You'll notice there's a big connection between like the Crockett's and international wrestling from those years. So he was brought in by Johnny Weaver. I think he debuted in, it was around 72. And I think he actually started off as a babyface. And they were really impressed with his first season or his first year there, however you want to say it. And then they wanted to bring him back. So JJ, I think he went back to the Mid Atlantics and kind of said, "Yeah, I'm going back to the Maritimes in the summer. They want me back." And yeah, that was that. I mean, he was predominantly a heel, but yeah, the relationship between JJ and Al is it definitely is interesting over the years.
Yeah, I think we're going to get into 1984.
We'll definitely get into a little more of that, but yeah.
Someone else on the list is someone that's almost forgotten as much as Freddie Sweet Dan. Mm-hmm. I believe he just passed away a few years ago, and that's Eric Pomeroy.
Yep, yeah, and it's funny that they were actually tag partners.
Might have been one of the best tag teams in international, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, Freddie Sweet Dan, he was almost predominantly a tag team wrestler. If you go through old records, I mean, he started off teaming with Pomeroy, I think, between like 70 and 71. Yep. And then he eventually moved on to, it might have been Dubois after that. And
I think it was.
There's a time period where he's like flip-flopping through partners. So Kurt Von Steiger and I think Mr.
Right,
X.
Yes, I forgot about, Von Steiger, yes. But yeah, Pomeroy, he was always billed as a top guy as well. And it's this largely goes unreported, but and I have no idea why. In '74, Pomeroy got in a car accident, and he got a really bad leg injury, and he didn't think he was going to be able to wrestle again. And that's largely, if you look online, how the story goes was that he had to retire in '74, but that's not true. He came back in '76 to see if he could get back into things, and I think he re-injured his leg when he was down here, when he tried to get back into things, and he had to call it quits after that.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, but no, another guy with a lot of potential, another Newfoundland guy.
Yep.
But when he was down here, again, he's another one of those guys that didn't get the billing he deserved on stateside. But he definitely got some good recognition down here. He was the North American champion a couple times, and he was one of their top stars for sure.
Absolutely. One of the names, like, you don't even have to be a wrestling fan. You say the name and they'll say the Claw. Killer Carl Krupp, his first territory in the Maritimes was international. That's
right. And to be honest, I kind of consider Krupp more of a Grand Prix guy.
Nowadays, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the years he was an international, I think it was 72, 73. He went to Grand Prix in 74, and then he briefly came back in 75 for a program with Leo Burke. But it's funny, Al credits himself with coming up with Krupp's gimmick.
Really?
Oh yeah, but I mean, Al has a habit, or he had a habit of stretching the truth, as those in the business tend to do sometimes. But yeah, if you ask Al, he would say that he came up with Kroop's gimmick and came up with the
The monocle?
whatever. Yeah, that's right. Came up with that and like the whole German heel thing, and he had that gimmick before he got to international.
Because I had always heard that he got that gimmick in Detroit as Karl von Kroop.
That's yeah, and I think that was just before he came to international.
Yeah.
But yeah. Regardless, Al credits himself for coming up with that gimmick, which is of course complete bullshit. But anyways,
It's an interesting one, though.
yeah, no, for sure.
Next on the list is a big coup for international during that time period, and that's Harley Race.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't know a whole lot of the story of how he was brought in. I mean, that was when they were working towards their NWA affiliation, and Harley came in the year before they had gotten their affiliation, but I'm sure the connection would have been Rudy's doing to bring him in and work some programs with Leo. I mean, Leo had worked with Harley stateside before that. There's a match that I saw online, and it's in the Mid-Atlantics, and it's Leo working with Harley a few years before Harley came in. But yeah, Harley came in and he worked a program with Leo for, I think it was a couple weeks, and they had feuded over the North American title. But yeah, as far as like the inner workings there, I'm not too sure how he ended up going there, but I would assume that Rudy had something to do with it.
Cool. Someone that was probably most remembered for Grand Prix, but again got his start in international, is No Class Bobby Bass.
I don't know a whole lot about Bobby. I mean, like he said in that interview, some guys preferred dealing with Rudy and some guys preferred dealing with Al. And he seemed to be one of those guys that liked to deal with Al.
Yep.
And yeah, he said, like in that interview, Al always treated him fairly and was good to him. And yeah, they had a good working relationship as far as I know.
Yeah.
One of the biggest names to tour with international during that time period is Andre the Giant. Any stories on him?
Sorry, you cut out there. Did you say Andre the Giant?
Andre the Giant, yeah.
Yeah. He came in '75 to work a tag match. It was with Leo, Alfred Hayes, and the Patriot. So it was Leo and Andre against Alfred Hayes and the Patriot. Again, I'm sure that was probably Rudy that booked Andre. I mean, Andre worked for Emil before, like a couple years before. I think it was in Grand Prix in like maybe 72 or 73. I think he worked some matches for.
I think so, yeah.
But anyways, yeah, and it's funny. He came back in '76 to do some battle royals, and my dad ended up picking him up at the airport.
Oh, wow, cool.
Yeah, he had helped out my grandfather quite a bit. Like, he did a little bit of security at the events and stuff like that. But just out of nowhere one day, I was like, hey, can you go pick a wrestler up at the airport? Having no idea who he was picking up. So he goes to the airport, and then here comes Andre the Giant, walking out of the airport. And he was with another guy, too. He forgets who it was, but yeah, Andre had to sit awkwardly in the back seat. And I think my dad drove him to the venue that night.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
One of
on
the
two wheels.
on two wheels. One of the first superstars to make it out of the Maritimes is the Spoiler, Don Jardine. A lot of people like him and a soul man, Rocky Johnson, people don't realize are from the Maritimes.
Yep.
What can you tell us about the Spoiler?
To be honest, I don't know a whole lot about him, unfortunately. It was just one of the names that Al never really seemed to bring up a whole lot. Rocky Johnson, I mean, of course, I think Rocky, he made it bigger than he did, and he was more well-known. So Al used to like to take the credit, I gave Rocky Johnson his start here, but really, I mean, Rocky worked for Emil before he worked for Al.
Yeah.
And Rocky was only with International for one season, but as far as the Spoiler goes, unfortunately, I don't know a whole lot about like any behind the scenes stories or like the inner workings there.
Cool. Bobo Brazil toured the Maritimes. Mm-hmm. Any stories on him?
Unfortunately, no, I don't. Again, that was probably a guy that Rudy brought in. I mean, he was he was pretty big back then too, and he came in and worked a couple matches. I don't think it was like a big program or anything like that. But in '69, they brought in like a lot of you see a lot of random big names going through the records there. Ox Baker was another one that ended up here. But yeah, unfortunately, any stories about Bobo Brazil, I really don't have any.
Probably during that time period, the biggest star in Canada at the time was the Stomper Archie Goldie. I believe he was the first North American champion. I could be wrong there.
No, that was the Beast.
Was the Beast.
Yeah,
so he
but they definitely feuded that year.
Any stories on Archie Goldie?
Al always spoke very highly of Archie. That they always had a good working relationship, and Archie was one of Stu Hart's guys too. And Al, he spent a lot of time on the phone with Stu Hart, I guess, when they were talking about like which guys they were going to bring up from Stampede for the season and stuff like that. And Archie was always on the list. But yeah, he always had. I mean, we will get more into this later on, but Archie seemed to prefer working with the Cormiers and Al over Emile Dupree. Because in '84 he actually ended up taking Emile's belt when International came back, and he brought Emile's belt to International as the North American champion. But we'll get into that later on.
We'll get into that in a bit, because that story, you told me that story, and that's mind-blowing.
Yeah. It is.
One of the names that I had zero clue until I found my stepfather's programs. George Crybaby Cannon was in International in the early TV days. What can you tell us about George Cannon?
So he was there. He came in '69. He was a wrestler then. Their first TV host was Lord Athol Leighton. That was in '69. Sorry, I'm going to probably go off on a bit of a side tangent here.
No, go for it.
Go ahead.
Their TV. Sorry. They didn't have success starting off until they started TV. So when they started in '69, they really didn't start off too hot. It wasn't until they brought in TV. I think it might have been partway through the season in '69 that things started to pick up, because now the local fans had something to invest in. They would follow the weekly TV show program and then go to the matches, on a weekly basis. But yeah, Cannon started off as a wrestler in '69, and then in '70 they brought him on as the host and commentator. I don't think he was wrestling in 1970. And then after him, the host was Les Thatcher. And International was actually Les Thatcher's first duty as a commentator. That was his first commentating gig. And Rudy gave him a shot there.
Les Thatcher wrestled for International before that, right?
He did, yes. Yeah, and he was one of the guys that he didn't think too highly of Al, to be honest. He thought he was a bit of a mark, and I mean, you could you could see that coming from somebody like Les Thatcher. He would have been a guy that would have been around the block a couple times at that point, and for a promoter to be trying to tell him better than a guy with his level of experience. Yeah, but anyways. Yeah, Les Thatcher, he wrestled first, and then he might have been doing both, to be honest. But yeah, wrestling first and then into commentating.
So speaking of hosting and commentating, what can you tell us about Clary Fleming? He
started commentating in '72. And my grandfather, I don't know, he was the one who brought him in, and I'm not quite sure how he came across Clary. But yeah, he had invited Clary to meet, offered him the gig. Clary didn't have any interest in wrestling or anything like that, but he agreed to do it, and he's the voice of International Wrestling. He ever since they brought him on in '72, '73, he stayed on until they were done in '84.
Interesting. There is a great podcast that Dave actually sent me. Who was Steve Murphy, right?
Steve Murphy was filling in for a local talk radio show at the time, but Steve Murphy, he's actually one of the few media members that speak about international wrestling. So he was really big into it, and he had interviewed Clary on the show last year. And it was a pretty good interview. It's nothing too in depth, but yeah, I mean, Clary still sounds great.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, no, he still sounds very sharp for his age. I don't know how old he is now, but yeah, I mean, he was always he had the relationship with him and Al was it was rocky at times, especially in '77. But they usually had a good professional working relationship and a bit of a friendship at times.
I know we're going to get into 1977 and what happened there, but just quickly, did Clary stick with your grandfather, or did he follow the Cormiers to Trans-Canada?
Oh God, that's a good question. I think he stayed. The TV in '77 is all over the place. We'll get into that. But I think yes, he did stay in '77 because I do have a story about that.
All right, we'll get into that in a second.
Yeah.
Just a few more names before we move on to another subject here. The McGuire twins. They do a tour. And for anybody that doesn't know who the McGuire twins are, Billy and Benny McGuire, these two twins, 800 pounds apiece. You've probably seen the pictures of them on little motorcycles. Mm-hmm. How did your grandfather bring in the McGuire twins?
To be honest, that Rudy probably brought them in as well. I mean, I remember them being here, and it was for a couple matches. But yeah, it's Rudy had all the connections. He was the guy that knew how to bring everybody, like anybody who was big at the time. Rudy somehow had a way of bringing these guys in, and the McGuire twins were probably within that group as well.
Like a real attraction, like not really good wrestlers.
No, exactly. I forget who they wrestled. It might have been a battle. They might have been in a battle royal, and I think they worked a tag match. I think Freddie Sweetan might have been in that match.
I think so. I've seen the results. I can't remember off the top of my head.
I think I have an article. I'll show you. I have a little encyclopedia I put together. But yeah, I think there's an article that I have somewhere in here about that match, and I think Freddie Sweetan was part of that match.
Because the McGuire twins were so big that they had to remove the bottom rope, so they rolled into the ring.
Yeah.
And they couldn't stand on the apron. Their stomachs were too big, so they had to stand in the corner. So one of the most awkward wrestling matches, but they were attractions. So what are you going to do?
No, exactly.
They were interesting, yeah.
They were.
Yeah, world's heaviest twins.
Yep.
Yeah. And they passed away very young, I think, too. And it might have been shortly after, like a couple years after they were with International, that they had passed away.
It's possible.
Yeah. Well, one passed away and the other kept wrestling and teamed up with Andre the Giant.
Right?
That's right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So final names here from just wrestling names. The Fabulous Kangaroos, Al Costello and Don Kent. Probably the best tag team, most successful tag team of the 50s and 60s and into the 70s. What can you tell us about them?
They were actually on the very first show that International did. The very first, and I think that was at the Halifax Forum. And sorry to go off on another bit of a side tangent. But International, and during their first year in '69, I don't know if they stopped running in New Brunswick altogether, but because of the low crowd turnouts in New Brunswick, there was a couple towns they had to stop running. But the Fabulous Kangaroos were there in '69. They might have done a couple shows in New Brunswick before they stopped kind of running in the area. But yeah, I forget who they wrestled in that match, but yeah.
Believe they were the first international tag champs.
Yeah, they were there for a couple weeks, and you very well may be right. I would have to double check that, but yeah, they might have had the first tag team trophy.
Yeah. So speaking of championships, as you can see behind me, I'm a belt mark. I'm just gonna go through the championship belts that International had. If you have a story about those, and maybe shed some light on what these belts were, if they some of these belts might not even exist because they're so little known about these championships. So the first one is the top title, the North American Heavyweight title.
Yeah, that was their main title. It looked very similar to Stampede's title. Like if you were to look at pictures of them side by side at a glance, you'd be like, that's the same title. But yeah, that was their main championship. They started with the North American title. But in '77, Al changed the name of the title, and it was a different title altogether. And he went with the Canadian heavyweight title.
Yeah.
But yeah, the North American championship, that was their main championship. And yeah, that's what everybody wanted.
Can you confirm or deny this? In the early 80s, Leo Burt goes to Maple Leaf Wrestling.
Yep.
And starts defending a North American title.
That's right.
Archie Goldie eventually wins that title and retires that title. Is that the same title?
I believe so. Because I've seen things online with Leo holding that belt, and I mean, again, it's online. You don't know what's true and what's not, but it says Maritime's version of the North American title. And I've seen pictures, like with Tommy Gilbert when he held it in '76. Yeah, it looks very similar to Stampede's title.
Yeah, I always say.
I'm pretty sure that is International's title that Leo's holding in those pictures that you see.
It also looks like the North American title from Stampede, but the original AWA tag titles, it's got that design as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. And there was a lot of belts that looked the same back then. I mean, if you look at some of the NWA, like the NWA tag team titles, like back from the '70s and '80s, looked the same as some of the heavyweight titles. You know, it's like that kind of eagle-looking belt.
Yep.
But anyways, yeah, a lot of the belts back then looked the same. They probably all went to the same designer, to be honest. But yeah.
Probably.
So I'm going to lump these next two championships together. So the international tag team titles and the taped fist title.
Yep.
So I had no clue until I saw pictures, and thanks to you for showing me these pictures. Not belts, trophies.
Yeah, those were both trophies. The taped fist, that didn't come around. I think it might have been in '72 or '73. Leo was the first holder of the taped fist trophy. He had feuded with Killer Carl Krupp. And, he had won that. I don't know if it was a tournament or whatever, but anyways, him and Killer Carl Krupp ended up being the final two. Leo won the trophy. And, the tag trophy, that was around since the beginning, as far as I know.
In '76, I believe, they introduced the Maritime heavyweight title and the Maritime tag team titles.
Yeah.
And I believe those were belts. They weren't trophies.
Maritime was definitely a belt. I've seen pictures of Leo with that, and that was definitely a belt.
The Maritime tag, we're not sure. I know that it was Frenchie Martin and Michel Martel with these titles.
Yep.
Is there a reason why your grandfather was changing the titles at that time?
To be honest, I'm not too sure. Like, that's when things kind of started to fall apart on the inside with him and the Cormiers, and that's when they were beginning to separate. So that might have had something to do with it. But as far as like the backstory behind it, I'm honestly not too sure as to why he would have changed that.
In 1984, when your grandfather came back, there's an international heavyweight title and global tag team titles. Was that just new belts, probably?
No, the international heavyweight title, to be honest, that's what JJ had won from Ted DiBiase in '79. I think is when he won it. I forget what the territory was. It wasn't the Mid-Atlantics. It might have been Memphis, but don't quote me on that. But I just know that he won it from Ted DiBiase in '79, and he had kept it until '84, and then that's the belt that he brought in.
Interesting.
When they had started back up in '84.
I did not know that. Yeah. And the global tag titles, that might have just been...
That was something they created, as far as I know. That was their own creation. The roster in '84 was relatively weak and underwhelming compared to the '70s. We'll get into that later on.
Yeah.
But I mean, the main holders of that belt in '84 were the Wild Samoans.
Yes.
Not those Wild Samoans, it's a different Wild Samoans. But
no,
we'll get into them later on.
Yeah. Did your grandfather ever talk to you about any rivalry between ESA International Wrestling and Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling?
Yes, I know he didn't think too highly of Emil. There was always some competition there. To be honest, there's a few promoters that he really didn't have a good opinion on. Tunnies were another one that he never really had a whole lot of good things to say. I'm not too sure what the beef is there. Really, to be honest, the only Canadian promoter that he had anything good to say about was Stu Hart. But yeah, as far as the rivalry goes with him in Atlanta Grand Prix, I mean, yeah, he always saw International, and I mean, to be honest, they were the top tier promotion in the '70s, and Emil was seen as the second tier. I mean, outlaw promotion back then, and I mean, by definition, that's what outlaw was. International had the NWA affiliate, and Grand Prix was the promotion without the NWA affiliation, and that's what the outlaw definition is.
So your grandfather was very successful from 69 to 76, and in 77 there's a rift between him and the Cormiers, and there's an incident with your grandfather breaking his leg. Could you get into that story?
Yeah, so the rift really started, I think, back in '75, and it's unfortunate because that's when their strongest years were '75 and '76, and things really started to break down pretty much when the season in '76 ended, and I mean probably a bit before that too. But Leo and Bobby, they bought out Rudy's half of the promotion. Rudy, I think, was just looking to separate from everything altogether. Leo and Bobby bought out his half, and they wanted Al to sell his half. Al didn't want to sell, but a lot of, I don't want to say all of them, but Al had a horse barn in Halifax, and then I think Rudy might have had one as well in New Brunswick. They were all horse lovers. So Al was trying to break in a horse, and when he was like, that's like taming the horse kind of thing. I don't know if you've ever heard the term before, but anyways, he was trying to break in the horse. The horse ended up bucking him off, and he broke a bone in one of his legs. I forget what the actual injury was, but he was in the hospital for, it wasn't like a big hospital stay, but he was in there, I think, for like maybe a week or something like that. And it was during that time, and I don't know if like Rudy and the rest of the Cormier saw an opportunity there, but I guess my grandfather's version of events was that Rudy brought in some checks while he was in the hospital, got him to sign them. I don't think he knew what he was signing at the time, but that granted Leo and Bobby's half of the promotion. And then and then in '77 was when Leo and Bobby went with TCW, and Al kept things going with International.
So with International, like the Maritime crew followed Leo and the Cormiers, correct?
The guys that were loyal to them went with them, and TV back then was kind of a mess because Al had all the media connections. So he was the one that made all the arrangements with CTV. I guess it would have been ATV back then. But anyways, and a guy named Joe Irving was the guy that Al was dealing with. So when Bobby and Leo approached him about TV, they were only used to dealing with Al. So they saw no reason not to continue dealing with Al. So they allowed Al to keep his TV spot for '77. TCW was given a half hour on TV, but the TV situation is weird. I think their TV only aired in Halifax and not Dartmouth, or vice versa, which is strange. But that's just what I heard, and I'm not too sure what time they were on. It might have been later later on at night, but it was only a half-hour show, and like back then without TV, you really ended up with nothing. So, and on Al's side of things, he just had a new crop of guys that nobody knew.
Yeah. So, quick question about the TV.
Yep.
So you said in Dartmouth and in Halifax. Would they have been in New Brunswick as well?
That I don't know. The TV, it's kind of a mess, and it was a bit of a mess in '84 too. But yeah, as far as who got access to it, like I'm sure, like in rural areas, you might have gotten the channel, whatever channel it aired on. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure how it worked out. I just know that it was a local TV show, but not everyone could watch it.
Yeah, because I know Grand Prix was also on ATV, so there's a potential that there were 3 wrestling shows on the same channel.
Yeah, well, they had eventually sold international spot to Emile Dupree, and then that's when he swooped in and really secured his spot.
Around the time when he got the Pafos.
That's right, yeah. Things really picked up for him in 78.
Yeah.
That's really when the golden years of Atlantic Grand Prix began, was in 78.
Yeah. Before we talk about post-international from the 70s, anything else from your grandfather's legacy? Because it's like you mentioned earlier, it's like almost forgotten. And it's like one of the goals here is preserve that memory, because we've talked a lot about the tape library. Where is that? And the most likely scenario is it got taped over. One master tape.
Yep. The relationship with Al and CTV didn't end on good terms either. So I'm not sure if that might have been a part of it as well. But I know taping things over, that was a very common occurrence back then. But whenever they're highlighting Atlanta Grand Prix, they're able to pull up tapes, no problem. And I know they have much more of an extensive library, but international is all gone. So, as far as what happened to the tapes, I'm not sure, but it was probably a little bit of everything between being taped over and things ending on a bit of a sour note there.
What percentage do you think that something could be fined? Like from the 80s maybe, but what about the 70s? Because there's nothing from the 70s.
70s, I'm highly doubtful that anything from the 70s exists, and that really sucks.
Absolutely.
Because you're really missing out on probably the best years of wrestling in the Maritimes, I would say. And I mean, I know I'm coming from a place of bias when it comes to my point of view on things, but if you look at International's run in the 70s, I don't think Atlanta Grand Prix can touch that in any year from the run of the 80s and especially not in the 70s. But yeah, I mean, and just if you look at the talent who was here in the 70s, you had Terry Funk. He came and defended the NWA title against Leo. Jack Briscoe, he was here. He defended the NWA title against Leo. Dory Funk was here on 2 occasions. And then, of course, Harley Race. I mean, the list of guys that were here, it's more easier to list the guys that weren't here than the guys that were here. It's a very extensive list, and it's a who's who. But yeah, it's unfortunate that there's nothing left over at all that I can find.
Yeah, it's like I told you a few weeks ago. It's shit like that keeps me up at night.
No, because imagine how I feel.
yeah, the grandson of the promoter.
Yeah. No, and he had hounded CTV for years, even after long after International was done and over with. Every now and then, he would make a trip down to the CTV studios on Roby Street. Where's the tapes? How come you have nothing left over? He was a thorn in their side pretty much until he passed, in one way or another.
With good reason, though.
No, absolutely. And it's a shame that things went down the way that they did. And I mean, there's that small slimmer of hope that something will turn up somewhere down the road, but if anything's going to turn up, it's going to be likely from 84, and it would be something that somebody doesn't know that they have at the time.
So what did your grandfather do between 1977 and the revival of international wrestling in 1984?
Yeah, so between when things ended in 77 and before things started back up in 84, he got into a few different things. I'm not exactly sure the chronological order of these things, but one of his big ventures, are you guys boxing fans at all?
I am. I am.
Okay, so after things had ended with International, when Trevor Berbick came to Halifax, he was Trevor Berbick's manager with a local trainer by the name of Tom McCluskey.
Yeah.
So he had managed and promoted a couple fights for Trevor Berbick, and the relationship only lasted a couple of months. And I think that was in the early 80s when Berbick was down here.
Yeah.
And then there was another local boxer that he managed and promoted for named Dave Downey. I don't know if you've ever heard the name or not.
I've heard the name, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, but apparently there was a show or a fight that Al was putting on for Dave Downey, and I think Dave might have backed out at the last second, and Al was out of a lot of money for that show. So, and then he got into a few like kind of pyramid scheme businesses, and
Okay.
Yeah.
him and my grandmother. Apparently, my grandmother made really good coleslaw. So they had started mass producing coleslaw and selling it to local grocery stores, and that was mildly successful. Like they were able to earn a pretty decent living off of selling this coleslaw, I guess.
Really?
So to Sobeys and a few of the other local grocery stores. I have no idea how they mass produced a bunch of coleslaw, but anyways, that was another business venture that they got into, and they had some mild success with it.
Back to the boxing thing, for people that don't know, Trevor Berbick is the last opponent of Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
And he is the man that Mike Tyson beat for the WBC heavyweight title to become the youngest heavyweight champion of the world ever. So
Exactly.
he passed away in 2006, I believe.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So, next question here. What's the story? Or, scratch that. Do you know the story about how the revival of International came together in 1984?
So apparently him and JJ, they had kept in touch over the years. This is JJ's version of events. But, I mean, and this was when they were starting back up. I don't know if that was for the sake of promotion, but apparently him and Al, they had kept in contact over the years. I don't know to what extent that relationship was, but apparently they would touch base every now and then. Al wanted to get back into things. He wanted to take a spot back from Dupree at the time. And I don't know if he had reached out to JJ personally. I think maybe in passing he had mentioned it to JJ, and JJ wanted to be involved. And these are just things that I've read about JJ and what his version of events were. But and there might have been somebody else from Florida, because that's where JJ was at the time when they started back up, was with CWF. And there might have been another guy that helped out as well. But yeah, Al was looking to get back into it, and JJ was eager to be involved, I guess.
So, what's the story behind this 1984 revival? It only lasted one season, and only one match exists from that season. I think, like you said, there's only like one full show. I know it's not the full show, but the TV show itself, which is Rick Martel versus Leo Burke for the AWA World Heavyweight title. And there's a short promo, 30-second promo that exists. So why did the season only last one season?
Well, TV was a big issue then as well. They wanted their spot back with ATV, but Emil, of course, didn't want to give that up. So they had to go. I think they might have tried CBC, and I don't think CBC was in the wrestling business. So they were given ASN, which was the secondary station. And apparently ASN was only available on satellite dishes and I guess some of the more rural areas back then. So they were given ASN. And of course, they weren't reaching as wide of an audience as they were reaching in the 70s. So, yeah, the TV was a big issue. And I don't think, and again, the roster back in 84, like I said, was relatively weak and underwhelming compared to the roster in the 70s. And there were a lot of names that they wanted to bring in that just didn't pan out. I know Dusty Rhodes was one of them. They really wanted to bring Dusty Rhodes in back then. They wanted to bring Terry Funk back. They wanted to bring Dory back, Andre. They pretty much wanted to bring back all the big names. But Dusty was one of them that one of the main ones they wanted to bring that didn't pan out, and also Ric Flair. But of course, he ended up wrestling for Emil Dupree.
What's the story there?
Between Ric Flair and going with Emil Dupree?
Because didn't that happen around the same time as the AWA title match?
Yeah, I think the Ric Flair and Steve Pettipaw match, I think it might have happened around August. But they wanted to get their NWA affiliation back, and for some reason that didn't pan out, so they were given, I don't know if they were an AWA affiliate, but they had some sort of a relationship with AWA, and then that's what brought Rick Martel back. And to be honest, the storyline's better there anyways, because that's where he made his career debut with International. I mean, under the name Pat Kelly at the time.
Yep.
But he debuted, they say 74, but I'm pretty sure it was 73 that Rick Martel made his career debut.
Yes, it was.
So, to me, that's a better storyline than just randomly bringing in Ric Flair to have an NWA World Title match.
Agreed.
Very interesting up to now, to be real honest with you, because now Rick Martel, actually, I don't know if you might have heard that, but we had an episode way back, but a little while back, where we do this thing called Mark's Side of the Ring, where I review a match, because I'm kind of new to this. And especially like the 70s, the 80s, like I haven't really watched any of it at all. I mean, considering what's available out there, but one of the first matches that I reviewed was the Rick Martel against Leo Burke match for the AWA Heavyweight Championship. And it's kind of funny that you mentioned that, like, were they an affiliate or not? Because there were all of these representatives from the AWA that were there, and like it was such a big thing, and it was so interesting how it made it so much bigger than it was.
Yeah, and I think that match, I think that was broadcast like everywhere. I think that might have been on CBC, that was on ATV, ASN.
Really?
But unfortunately, it didn't lead to anything bigger.
Yeah, because it was in '84, right? So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Absolutely. So now we're gonna touch a little bit on the post international wrestling. So touching on WCW.
Yeah.
So how did your grandfather get involved with booking for WCW in the Maritimes?
Well, if you were to believe his version of events, he would say that Ted Turner called him up personally at home and invited him out to the offices in Atlanta and, wined and dined him and coerced him into promoting in Eastern Canada. That story, I would say, is probably bullshit. But if you look at the time of when he was approached by WCW, he was really the only promoter in Eastern Canada that wasn't really doing anything. The Tunnies would have been, it would have been Jack Tunney. He would have been with WWF at the time. Emile Dupree, he was still running with Atlantic Grand Prix at the time. Stu Hart, I'm sure he had no interest. He would have been in Western Canada anyways. So, and not only that, I'm sure there were some guys from the Mid-Atlantics there as well that probably remembered Al. But two likely candidates that would have known who he was probably would have been Jim Herd and Jim Barnett. Might have been two likely candidates that knew about him and said, hey, let's give this guy a try. He had some success in the 70s with the Cormiers and, went from there.
Okay, well, that's interesting. That absolutely is, because the next question that I want to kind of go over, it's something that we heard about, I believe.
I'm sorry to cut you off. He did actually fly out to the offices in Atlanta. Whether he actually met Ted Turner or not, I really don't know. But he did go out there to kind of, do some business meetings and smooth things out and kind of, map things out for how he was going to be or where he was going to be promoting in Eastern Canada.
Okay.
Very cool.
Well, it makes sense.
Oh yeah,
I can see why.
Still a cool story on his face, nonetheless. You don't have to stretch the truth, like some guys tend to do with this. But anyways.
But not everybody promoted WCW.
That's just that exactly, and that is a cool piece of family history that I have. Is that my family was part of WCW.
100%. And so like I was saying, so basically my next question was about something that we heard, I think it was during the interview with Bobby Bass.
Okay.
I think. But it is about the famous ammonia leak.
It was not Bobby Bass. We heard this on the Jim Cornette Experience.
Okay.
Or the drive-through.
Right. And I actually wrote Jim Cornette about that as well after Alec passed away.
Yeah.
We heard that. That's right.
I sent it to the group chat. What's the story here? Because Cornette had the best story of all time with this one, and the ammonia leak.
Great way to recall memories and just a way of storytelling about it. So WCW ran 2 shows in New Brunswick. The first one was at the Aitken Center for UNB. So there was a show. I don't know if it was the night before, but either way. So they ran a show there. That was a bit of a disaster as well, because some of the guys, they didn't end up showing up. Luger was supposed to be in the main event against Ric Flair. Flair ended up showing up late. He almost was a no-show. Luger was a no-show. The excuse that Al gave was that Luger had an infection in his knee or some sort of a knee injury that he was due for surgery. But there's a newspaper article, and I'll send it to you guys after the show. The guy who wrote the article called the hospital that Luger would have been staying at. Luger wasn't there. So maybe he was booked in under his real name, but whoever was at the hospital said, yeah, there's nobody under the name Lex Luger staying here right now that's due for surgery or that has any sort of a knee infection. So I'm not too sure what the actual story was there. But anyways, and the crowd turnout there wasn't great either. I mean, mind you, at the time, WCW was still relatively new to Canadian audiences.
Yeah,
100%.
So, I mean, they still had recognizable names, but they were still second tier to WWF at the time.
absolutely.
Right.
So then, of course, and then I mean, the whole tour in general is just bad luck. Just overall bad luck. Just shitty circumstances that were beyond Al's control. So, and then the following night, or maybe a couple nights later, I think it was the Lord Beaverbrook Arena.
That would make sense. I've heard of that.
That the ammonia leak happened at.
Yeah.
So, and I think the leak might have started in the afternoon, and then it really picked up in the evening when people were starting to line up at the door, and then that's when everybody noticed the smell, and then guys were starting to have bad reactions. A few of the guys ended up going to the hospital. Abdullah the Butcher was one of them.
Right.
My uncle had to go to the hospital, and Stan Lane of the Midnight Express, which was probably why Jim Cornette has such a recollection of this event. So Stan Lane had to go to the hospital, and maybe a couple of others, but those are the names I can remember for sure. And the whole show had to be shut down, and then they had to come to Halifax the following night, which it affected that show as well. And I mean, that show also didn't turn out great either. I think a couple guys that were, and I'm not too sure the names, I think some guys had border issues for that show. They couldn't get across the border. Luger was also scheduled to be in the main event for that, and of course he wasn't there because he didn't show up in New Brunswick. I think the only show that somewhat worked out was in Toronto. They did a show in Toronto. Luger was the main event for that, and I believe mostly everything worked out, except I think the crowd turnout wasn't great.
It's funny because this was 1990, and WWF came to the Moncton Coliseum 3 times that year, and pretty successful. They had the world champion Ultimate Warrior as the main eventer twice.
Yeah.
But it's funny because 1990 is also the final year of Grand Prix Wrestling.
Yes.
So it's funny how there's so much wrestling in the Maritimes in 1990 and 1991. It starts fizzling out more and more.
Yeah, no, it's interesting the way things turned out. Yeah, but that's because WWF really took over then. They were the biggest show, and then WCW was, they weren't exactly close to be behind them, but they were the second rate show.
Yeah,
at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean that's normal because they were taking over territories left and right. So
no, absolutely.
I mean that'd been for a while. So
yeah.
But yeah, very interesting story. And just to kind of touch as well on the Toronto show, actually, I was reading up on that while we were talking because I like doing my research as I'm listening.
Okay.
So that I understand better what's going on, especially
C&E Coliseum, I believe, is where that show was at.
Yeah, it could be. But I was just reading up on that, and you were talking about how your grandfather had been contacted. So he was saying that he got contacted by Ted himself.
Yeah.
And I was reading about how he said It was on the newspaper or on the news, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But how he said, yes, this is Ted from Ted Turner from CNN. And he answered, "Oh, this is Roy Rogers, Cowboy
and
King,"
hung up on him.
and hung up on him.
Yeah, that's the story that he stuck to for as long as I can remember.
I think it was the Toronto Star, so like that's hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
apparently, according to him, Ted called back after like, no, this is really Ted Turner, and we're really interested, having you promote in Eastern Canada. We're trying to set up shop over there. But anyways, yeah.
Oh man. But yes, so it was the Coca-Cola Coliseum.
Yeah,
in
that's
Toronto.
right. Yes.
Yeah.
Coca-Cola Coliseum. Yes, I knew there was Coliseum in the name somewhere.
Yeah, but it looked like a very interesting show because I think it actually featured, so as we all know him, The Undertaker.
Mark Calloway.
Yeah, Mark Calloway. He was on that show. I think
Mark.
the show opened with him, and he didn't wrestle. I think he just came out and squashed a guy.
Oh, that's possible.
And it might not have been. It might not have even been a match. He just came out, did whatever he was doing back then, and then I think he just left. I think the Steiners were part of that show. There was some good names on that show, but it's just like I said, WCW was fairly new to the Canadian crowds back then, and Canadian audiences, they were relatively unfamiliar with the product at the time.
100%.
Yeah, because there's differences between all the products, so that's understandable as well, right? So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So did your grandfather ever get approached, let's say, looking at different promotions, we could start with WWF. Like, has he ever been reached to promote shows in Canada or the Maritime specifically for WWF?
Not by them, but one story he's always kind of stuck to, and again, Al had a habit of stretching the truth and kind of things are interesting and fascinating enough on their own. You don't really have to make things up, but he used to design his own rings.
Okay.
International. So he used to, I don't know if engineer is the right word, but he used to draw blueprints and he used to really hone in on designing his own rings. So he used to design them for International. And he said he came up with the concept of using metal cable for the ropes and like the airplane cable and stuff like that.
Okay.
He claims that was his concept. Pretty sure that's bullshit, but he said he had sold his ring designs to Vince McMahon. But
okay,
if you look at the size of WWF's rings, I mean, to me, there's just no way. but that's just something that he's always claimed, was that he sold his rings designs to Vince McMahon and also to Ted Turner as well.
Right.
So.
Oh man, funny stories though. But how did your grandfather's time in the wrestling business shape your family's life? I guess going down from there.
Definitely always a topic of discussion. And I mean, like I said, when I was young, I was ignorant to Atlanta Grand Prix because I thought International was the only show in town. And when people would say Atlanta Grand Prix, I mean, when people talk nowadays, they still do conflate the two. And unfortunately, people think everything was Atlanta Grand Prix when they don't realize that International largely dominated the 70s. And I always, if they talk about a certain match, I saw Leo Burke and Terry Funk for the NWA title, Atlanta Grand Prix. I was like, well, no, that was International Wrestling. But anyways, But no, it's always been a big part of my family. It's something I've always taken great pride in. And it's definitely a legacy that I want to continue to make sure it stays out there and make sure that people remember how great it was.
Yeah, and I mean, we do really, really appreciate that because I'll be honest with you right now, I am guilty as charged. I had no idea that it existed.
Yeah,
I had no idea that Trans-Canada Wrestling.
Until you come across things online or photo albums and stuff like that. Unfortunately, everybody and I understand because Atlanta Grand Prix, they had longevity. They were around. If you look at how long Emil was promoting it, it's an impressive run. I mean, you can't deny that. Whether his roster was always strong or not, whether his shows were always strong or not, but I mean, you can't deny that he had a very impressive run for as long as he did.
Yeah, I think a lot of the reason that Grand Prix is more well known than International is because of the footage.
And, well,
If,
that's exactly it too. And footage is a
Yeah.
big part of it. And it's funny. Corey and I have spoken about this before. Internationals records, they're great,
Yeah.
but they lack footage. Atlanta Grand Prix records, at least online, are shit, but they have tons of footage to draw from. And you would think it would be the opposite, because if you look at footage on YouTube, and then you'll go to look up like the records online, and the records aren't there, but the
No.
footage is there. So
Yeah.
that's always been something that was kind of peculiar to me.
Yeah, and I think we've spoke about that as well, not being able to find
Yeah.
on a page about wrestling, like, oh, which match happened
Yeah,
on
yeah,
which
well,
date, and you're like, they were
yeah.
never here, but they
Yeah,
were.
exactly. And I mean, it's like Harley Race. He also wrestled for Emil. I think that was in '89.
89, yep.
He came
Oh, wow.
in and wrestled the Beast. You can find the match on YouTube, but because you want it. Okay, was he here for longer than just that one match, or was it just a one-off? But then when you go to look online, there's no record of him ever being at Atlanta Grand Prix.
Nothing.
So
It's crazy.
No, that part has always been strange to me. That the records really lack online.
Yeah, and actually, so my next question was in regards to, like, as you mentioned, so preserving the legacy of international wrestling and all that. Now, maybe I can kind of touch on something else. Like, do you, like, how is it that you do this? Like, have you, like, I don't know, like, is there anything available to you where you can, I don't know, like, publish stuff that's been available that he would have left behind, or like...
He's left me. To be honest, the things that I do lack in any sort of a collection are photo albums, and I lack old programs as well. So if you guys know anybody that's ever looking to part ways with their collection, I will take anything anybody has, absolutely. But no, he's left me. I have an interesting piece from J.J. Dillon. I can whip it out right here, actually. It was when they first started back up in '84.
I believe you showed me this one already.
Yes, that's right. And it's a letter from JJ.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's signed by him, and I forget who else, but it was because if you look at their TV in '84, and I mean you'll notice watching the Rick Martel match a little bit of footage from CWF. And their partnership was that, I mean, they were going to feature a lot of guys from CWF, and that's why, I mean, they also featured on their TV program back then matches from CWF to kind of prepare people for the guys that they were going to be bringing in.
Yeah.
But yeah, just bear with me here, sorry.
Yep.
Oh, it's all good.
Here we go, all right. So, yeah, this is the letterhead here.
CWF.
It's even got the branding and everything.
Yeah, I
That's
can
right.
I can read it for you if you want.
Absolutely. Go for it.
This is this is typed up from JJ. So this is dated October 24th, 1983.
Okay.
So this is where they start, like the ball started rolling to get things started back up. So it says, "Dear Al, I was very pleased to hear from you initially, some 4 months ago, when you first indicated your plans to revive international wrestling in the Maritime provinces. It was here with you about 10 years ago that I got my first big break and an opportunity to display my talents. And it is for this reason that I have a special feeling for the wrestling fans in Atlantic Canada and for your promotion in particular. Since my first appearance for you in 1973, I have had a chance to wrestle in arenas in all corners of the world, from the Orient to the South Pacific and to Europe, starting in extensively in matchmaking and in promotion, as well as continuing my own wrestling career. It is with these thoughts in mind that I feel I am now in a position to offer you my services and the benefits of my extensive experience. To be successful once again in your promotional venture, you will need quality competitive wrestling talent properly showcased on a strong established television station with venues in larger established arenas. From copies of correspondence from various managers and directors are looking forward to your return. It is gratifying to see the team of Ron Ford providing printing and promotional services, Ed Brown, who produced your television programs in the past, and Clary Fleming, who was your on-camera host and commentator, once again rallying around you. Your one remaining need is the assurance of the availability of a nucleus of top wrestling talent, as we have discussed on the phone." Sorry, this is the second page. This is where I can. This is where I can and will be of help. These past 2 years, I have assumed similar responsibilities working with Championship Wrestling from Florida here in Tampa. I have spoken with Mr. Eddie Graham, who founded and continues tapes produced here as part of the Florida promotion, available to be once you formally kick off your season. So they had started their TV before they actually started running shows, and they were
Okay.
featuring matches from CWF. Further, I can assure you the availability of the very best in wrestling talent, many of the faces that have made this promotion here in Florida a success for over 30 years. How befitting it would be if we could secure a world title match in Atlanta, Canada for the first season back. Though it would be impossible to guarantee this at this point, I would do everything possible to bring this about. I look forward to meeting with you personally after the first of the year to complete our negotiations, to finalize our plans and preparation for what I am confident will be the opening of the first of many successful seasons to come. So we saw how that turned out. I look forward to meeting with you
Man.
personally. Yeah, please keep me advised as to your progress, and if I can be of any further help prior to our upcoming meeting, don't hesitate to call me. Sincerely yours, James J. Dillon.
That when
Impressive.
Dave sent me that, I literally had goosebumps because you're putting yourself in the middle of the territories right there.
Yeah.
Straight from
Yeah.
Championship Wrestling from Florida. You have to think he's talking about Eddie Graham that would take his own life a year and a half later.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
You know,
And I
it's
think
crazy.
Mike Tanaka at the time I don't think Eddie was in good mental health then either. So Mike Tanaka, I'm pretty sure Tanaka, that's Mike Tanaka. He was doing a lot of the office work back then and handling the office duties. So I do have a letter from him as well, just approving of Al to use the footage from CWF. Yeah, he was doing a lot of the office work back then over Eddie Graham.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
That's so interesting, eh?
Oh, yeah.
Like JJ Dillon gave his you gave me my start in wrestling. This is
Yeah.
why I am successful, and I
yeah,
owe you
exactly.
this, right?
Totally crediting International Wrestling and Al Zinck with his success, which is pretty
that's
crazy.
awesome.
Crazy.
Yeah,
Like, to put it at the times, think about this. A year after this season in international wrestling, the Four Horsemen is formed in Jim Crockett Promotions.
Yep.
Like, the last thing that J.J. Dillon did before doing the Horsemen was probably international.
yeah, no, yeah, it would have been. Yeah, when
Yeah.
you look at it in that perspective, yeah.
But how many people know about that? That's kind of what impresses me, right?
You know,
It's
and
so
that's exactly it. Not too many people do. And I mean, I know this was just essentially a very small part of JJ's career, but he plays a very significant role in the history of maritime wrestling overall. You know,
Yeah,
he
100%.
was a very big part of it down here.
yeah, yeah.
And
But yet,
I wish he spoke about it more than what he does. I know he had mentioned it in his book, and to be honest, he doesn't say a whole lot about my grandfather in his book either. And what he does, it isn't exactly a glowing review either. He just refers to him simply as a mark for himself, just the typical,
Man.
pro wrestling talk. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. But I guess kind of to close it off. So like if Al Zinck was here today, what do you think he would say about the current state of wrestling, especially in the Maritimes?
See, it's funny. I know his take on today's product. I mean, he hasn't liked the product of wrestling, or he didn't like the product of wrestling for a long time, and just the direction that it took. He was very much a purist, and he took the business seriously and wanted people to take it seriously as well.
Right.
And it was funny. Back when SmackDown and Raw came to Halifax, I think it might have been in 2003.
Yeah.
They did 2 shows here, but Steve Murphy brought him on to do an interview just to kind of get his take on the state of wrestling. And it could, and it was a funny interview. I wish I had a copy of that, and maybe CTV at least has that, because it is a funny interview. Because his take on the business at that point was not a good one. But I mean, on the flip side of things, if you look at the state of wrestling in the Maritimes now, it's comparable to what it was like in the 70s. I mean, it's an apples to oranges comparison, and it's on a
Right.
much different scale. But if you just look at the scene overall, it's a healthy scene, and it's a loyal fan base. There's shows on a regular basis, sometimes multiple. So, I mean, you could make the argument that it's better now than what it's ever been. So I mean, I think you would at least be able to see that side of things and be like, okay, you know, I may not like the product, but you know, at least it's doing well. And you know, I kind of had a small role in it, I guess. It would maybe be his take.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd say, yeah, absolutely. And really, like, I think kind of where you touched on that, like right now, you know, mentioning like regular shows, I think it's the first time in a very long time that we can see that there are wrestlers that are going full time.
No, absolutely, yeah, and and the scene it's extremely alive and extremely healthy right now. So it's a good time to be a wrestling fan in the Maritimes, and just like it was a good time to be a wrestling fan back then.
Exactly.
Exactly.
But there was one story that I had about 77. We didn't really get into too much of 77 and the story behind there, and the guys that came in from the Memphis territory.
Oh, that's right. We forgot that.
Yeah. So if you look at the roster in 77, it was an entirely different roster of guys compared to the previous years. And it largely they were guys from the Memphis territory. So you had Dave Schultz, you had Terry Gordy, who would have been just a kid then. I
Like
think he might have been 18 at the very most.
Wow.
Yeah.
Possibly 16, but yeah, no, definitely no more than 18. You had the Bicentennial Kings here, Dennis Condrey and Phil Hickerson. Yeah, Don Fargo. You also had Steve Travis, who went by Stonewall Jackson down here. But yeah, I mean, when you look at it in hindsight, that's an all-star roster. Just listing off those names. But they didn't connect with the local fans because, unfortunately, nobody knew who they were. Even though they were on TV, they weren't their maritime heroes that they were used to seeing on a weekly basis. So things didn't pan out. Clary was still the commentator and the host, but the funds ended up drying up, and Al had to go out of business. But that season culminated with the group of the wrestlers going to his house and playing Repo Man in exchange for payments.
Oh, no.
And I don't know who all went. I know apparently Steve Travis was one of them. And this is what it reminded me of the story. Clary Fleming was in that group as well. And apparently he had gotten...
Oh, my.
Which is surprising. But apparently Dave Schultz, surprisingly, was not in that group to go to the house. You would think he would have been the first in line.
Yeah.
But anyways, apparently Clary Fleming, he got a nice, expensive wooden oak dining room set. In exchange for payment that year. Al still may owe him money for all I know, but anyways, yeah. No, it was not a good season in 77, but yeah, like I said, looking back in hindsight, like I said, it's an all-star roster.
Yeah. And the legacy, like the legacy, I would almost call it a silent legacy that international wrestling left on the global map of wrestling.
Yeah, no,
especially
absolutely.
with the stars that got their
And
starts.
the thing is, like, so many guys that were here at that time, I did their memories. It was so long ago. They always just refer to the area as the Maritimes.
Yeah.
And even those guys, you can tell in interviews they'll mention Emile Dupree, but you know they're talking about international.
Yeah.
Just by the guys they list, or whatever they're referring to at the time. You go, oh, that was international. That wasn't Atlantic Grand Prix.
Yeah. You know, hindsight being 2020, do you think if the Cormiers could change things in 77 and not go behind Al's back and do Trans-Canada Wrestling, do you think they stick with Al? Because 77, 3 promotions, 78, 1 promotion. Clearly Trans-Canada did not work.
No, and that's surprising that it didn't. And I think their big issue, again, and TV was a big part of wrestling back then. Like, that's really what kind of determined your success, was if you had weekly television that reached a wide audience. And TCW, unfortunately, didn't have that. I think a lot of the audience back then turned on their TVs in '77 with international, be like, well, who are all these guys? Where did Leo
Yeah.
Burke go? And completely unaware that they had went off on their own. Other than like keeping your eye out for promotional things locally, a lot of people had no idea. I talked to some people who were fans of the product back then, and they had no idea that they were running shows during '77 when they were just doing shows down the road. So,
It's crazy.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's,
like-
it's unfortunate that things turned out the way they did, and I mean, if it's unfortunate that Al and the Cormiers weren't able to set aside their differences because they really did have something special at the time. They would have went down with the Stampedes, the Maple Leafs, every top Canadian territory. And me personally, I still do consider them one of the top Canadian territories, even though they were a bit of a flash in the pan territory. You still can't deny their success when things were hot.
Agreed, 100%.
Yeah, and a lot of it too. Like back in the '70s, TV was to wrestling then what internet is to wrestling now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
There's a reason that WWE is on Netflix and not on TV anymore.
No,
'Cause
absolutely.
nobody watches TV.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And everything is to streaming now. And having a TV contract that was able to reach a wide audience, yeah, like I said, that really determined your success back then.
100%.
I agree.
Yeah,
Really
but
good.
yeah, and then like I said in '84, I mean, again, their roster, if you look at it in '84, was relatively weak and underwhelming. Like I said, the Wild Samoans were there, but it wasn't those Wild Samoans.
Yeah.
It was two guys from it was Chief Tapu and the Great Teo, I think, and they had
Yep.
also worked for Al in the '70s as well. They went under different names, but they were from the Portland area, and they were Al's main tag team in '84. And then I think Mark Lewin was one of their top guys. Leo wasn't there right away. He came in a couple weeks afterwards. But Rudy and Bobby were there from the get-go, as far as I know.
Well, this was a trip down memory lane. Anything else before we close the show? Something that we missed? Something that you like to say to your grandfather's fans?
We pretty much covered all the main points. The only thing that I'd like to part with or give parting words on is that I just hope this helps kind of continue the legacy and just makes people aware that Atlanta Grand Prix, it wasn't the only show in town. And no offense, they weren't even the biggest show in town back then. And yeah, like I said, the easiest way to simplify wrestling history in the Maritimes is international. They had the '70s. Atlanta Grand Prix had the '80s because there was no international. And yeah, that's to me, that's how I look at it.
Very well said. Pretty sure this isn't the last time that you're going to see Dave on this channel. I think we're going to collaborate on a few things here. But I want to thank Dave Arthur for coming on.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much for having me on. And anytime you want me back on, even if it's just to shoot the breeze about wrestling in general, I'm always willing to come on. And hopefully I gave you guys a good show. And hopefully
You did.
It was interesting. And hopefully I had a good impression on everybody.
I believe this is a really good show. Big thank you to the Big Picture Chris Cook on
Yes,
getting us
absolutely.
connected. Just big thanks to him. And yeah, with that being said, we're going to end this episode here, and we will see you next week.
All right, guys, all the best. And thanks again so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and remember to catch us here every Wednesday for a new episode. Please visit us on Facebook, Instagram, and more. Links are in the description. See you next time.
Don't miss out and don't be